Everyone, Tim Brown, welcome back to my Apple Podcast. As you know, I love Hype by Tumult, which is for the Mac. It's an HTML5 editor that allows you to create really cool animations. And now you can create those animations using scenes. And that's because of the new features that have been added, or controls, should I say, in the inspector. For example, when you go to the scene inspector, you'll see you have all these options for initiating certain kinds of actions that can occur on scene load or on scene unload and so forth. And I'm going to take or make use of some of those features. So what I'm going to do is create a little animation that could serve kind of as an intro to, say, a small scale website. I'm just using the default size 600 by 400, and I've already sized a few images to coincide with this format. And you can see I have a background already set up. And I'm going to go ahead and just create a very simple little animation. So I have some silhouette figures that I downloaded off the web. I'm going to go ahead and bring one of those figures in. I'm just going to go ahead and just set it up right here. To start with, I'm going to hit the record button, and I'm going to bring it up to 2 seconds. And then I'm going to move the figure and make it a lot smaller, as if it's going back into the distance. Then I'm going to place it back there. And then I'm going to go 2 seconds over on the timeline, and then move those figures, and then resize them once again so they show up on the right hand side rather than the left hand side. I'm going to rescale it just a little bit. Okay, and let's go ahead and play that back. Okay, now what I want to do is duplicate the first scene. So I'm going to go up to scene and then duplicate, but I'm going to duplicate without animations. That way the scene still looks the same, but without the animations, and the figures are still in the same place as they are in scene 1. I now want to add another background because I want the backgrounds to change during this scene. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in another background and just add it in here. And this is called back 2. That's what I labeled it as. I'm going to go down to my timeline actions. I'm going to go ahead and move the men up so that the men are on top of that second background, but still on top of the first background. I'm now going to go ahead and animate the background so that one background gradually fades in to replace the other. Now let's go to back 1, and we're going to add a keyframe next to opacity under properties, and then we're going to go up to 2 seconds. And we're going to add another keyframe next to opacity under properties. We're going to keep it the same because we want the opacity to be at 100% for the first 2 seconds. But between 2 seconds and 4 seconds is where we want to see the shift. So I'm going to go up to 4 seconds, and I'm going to add another keyframe under opacity in the properties category. And now I'm going to go up to the elements inspector, and I'm going to reduce that opacity to 0. So between 2 seconds and 4 seconds, it's going to fade to white. So let me just scrub through the timeline here. For the first 2 seconds, it's going to remain the same, and then between 2 and 4 seconds, it's going to fade to white. And that's where I'm going to bring in my second background. So let's go to 2 seconds again. Only this time we're going to select back number 2, and under properties, select opacity and drop in another keyframe there by just tapping on the keyframe icon there, and then go up to elements inspector. Actually, we're going to hold off on that. We're going to go to 4 seconds. And with back number 2 selected, we're going to add another keyframe. And then under the elements inspector, we're going to change the opacity to 100%. So while one is fading out, the other is fading in. So let's go ahead and scrub through. So first 2 seconds, background number 1 fades out, and then background number 2 fades in. Now we also want to do something with the standing figures as well. I want them to fade out as well, and I want to bring in 2 more figures. So what I'm going to do is grab 2 more silhouettes that I created. I just grabbed from the web, and I'm going to bring them on the left-hand side of the composition. And I'm going to place them right there. And they're just labeled couple. So we're going to go back to 2 seconds on the timeline. And with couple selected, I'm going to go down under properties again, add a keyframe for opacity, and I'm going to just take the opacity down to 0. And then I'm going to go down to our men, And I'm going to add a keyframe next to opacity as well, still at the 2-second mark. And then I'm going to go up to 4 seconds, add another opacity keyframe, and then I want the min to fade out. So with that keyframe, I'm going to go back to Element Inspector and take the min down to 0 as well. Now I'm going to go back to couple, and we're going to add a keyframe at 4 seconds there as well under properties and opacity. And this time I'm just going to go ahead and just bring that up to 100%. So as one's fading out, the other's fading in, just like I did with the background. So let's go ahead and scrub through. So first 2 seconds, background, and the min are still visible. But when we get to between 2 seconds and 4 seconds, the 2 min and the background begin to fade out. And the young couple on the left and the new background begin to fade in. And that's how I want the animation to play out. Now, the best part is I want to set this up so that scene 1, when it is complete, automatically goes to scene 2. You couldn't do this in earlier versions of Hype, but you can do this now. So let me just go ahead and just change this to scene 2. I'm going to go back to scene 1, and now we're going to go back to some more controls that we now have with Hype that we didn't have before. It's under the Scene Inspector. And if you look down below, you see you have a lot of different options. You have on scene load, on scene unload, and on any timeline complete. You can tell that timeline what to do. So in this case, what I've selected was the on timeline complete, jump to scene, and then jump to next scene. And then I have transition as instant because I want this to happen instantaneously. So when animation in scene 1, let me just go ahead and scrub through, is complete, is automatically going to go to scene 2, and that second animation is going to kick in from scene 2, like so. So let's see what this plays like in a browser. So let's go ahead and preview this in Firefox. And there's the animation for scene 1. And there's the animation for scene 2. So I set it up so that they fade in from scene 1 to scene 2 automatically without even having to click on a button. So if I wanted to, I could actually use these animations as a kind of a prelude to my intro page, to my website, for example. So let's go ahead and duplicate yet another scene without animations. We'll call it scene 3. And now I'm going to set up an animation so I can remove the couple and then bring in a photo of myself with a welcome onto the page as a kind of an intro. So let's first start with the couple. And I'm going to do this manually once again. So I'm going to go down to properties and I'm going to select origin left and origin top at the beginning of the timeline. I'm going to go up to 2 seconds and do the exact same thing, origin left, origin top. So for the first 2 seconds, the figures are going to stay in that position, but between 2 and 4, I want them to change. So at 4-second mark, I want to select origin top, origin left again, only this time I want them to go outside the frame. I don't want them to be visible anymore. So I want them to actually move outside the picture frame. So it's going to look something like that. And then when we get to that point, I want to bring in a photo of myself, maybe 1 second before that. From the right-hand side, from the left-hand side, I'm going to come into view. So I'm going to grab this picture of myself here and put it on the left-hand side. And I'm just going to gradually come in from the left-hand side as the couple is fading out. So basically what I want to happen is I want to be able to bring myself into the picture frame like this after the couple has left. And I'm going to do that with a simple little animation. So right now I'm outside the frame. I'm at the 3-second mark. I'm going to go down under properties, select origin left and then origin top. So that places me outside the frame at this point, but between 3 seconds and 5 seconds, I want to come into the frame as the couple is exiting. So at the 5-second mark, I'm going to select origin left, origin top, and I'm going to bring myself right into the frame like so. So let's scrub through that. So as I scrub through, you can see I'm outside the picture frame. When I get to the 3-second mark, I'm going to start to come in right behind that couple. Now also at this point, I want to add some text to kind of conclude my intro. So I'm just going to go ahead and insert text and just add a welcome. I'm going to highlight welcome and then go to text under inspector and enlarge that. Maybe add bold and maybe make it white. I'm going to place that right there. And that's called text under my timeline actions. I'm going to go ahead at the moment under the element inspector and I'm going to make welcome 0 transparency. And at the 5-second mark, I'm going to add a keyframe next to opacity under properties. And then for 10 seconds, so at the 7-second mark, I'm going to add another keyframe next to opacity under properties. And only then am I going to bring the opacity up to 100%. So between 5 and 7 seconds, welcome is going to fade in after I come in. So let's go ahead and just play that back. Now I have one more thing to do. I need to go to scene 2 now, and then under scene inspector, have it do the exact same thing. So the settings are actually still set up. So under on any timeline complete, I have jump to scene, next scene, and I have it set to do this instantaneously. So now I have 3 scenes set up that are going to transition from one to the next as the animations are completed. So let's view the whole thing now in the Safari browser. So here's scene 1. Gradually scene 2 is going to fade in. Here I come for scene 3, and there's my welcome. And I can add a link to the welcome or whatever it is I want to do at this point. But this is a great way to use scenes to set up your animations. I hope this little tutorial was helpful. My name is Tim Brown. Thanks for tuning in. Check me out at myapplepodcast.com or youtube.com/myapplepodcast.